Hi, I'm Missy Foxman with the Entertainment Software Association. Welcome to today's presentations of Chums, Cheaters, and Creeps, Keeping Online Play Safe for Everyone. The video game industry wants you to play safe, and today's panel of experts will offer insights about how to do that. Stephen Balcom, the CEO of the Family Online Safety Institute, will lead the discussion and leave some time for audience questions. Stephen, thank you and take it away.
Well, thanks very much for that introduction, Missy. I really appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation with three leading experts in the field. In a moment, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. But just a note to say that we will be taking questions. So please let us know what's on your mind. And when you do, let us know who you are and where you're from by using the link on the right-hand side. So with that, Pat, would you like to go first and introduce yourself?
Be happy to, Stephen. Happy to be here today, and thank you all for joining us. I'm Pat Vance from the Entertainment Software Rating Board. We do a number of things on behalf of the industry, including assigning ratings to games and enforcing marketing and advertising guidelines to ensure that companies are being responsible in terms of how they market their products. And then we also have a privacy certification program. We are a COPPA Safe Harbor, so we're helping companies with their websites and mobile apps, ensuring that they are not only compliant with laws, but implementing best practices when it comes to the collection and sharing of personal information.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Rachel.
Yes, hi, I am Dr. Rachel Cohert. I am the research director for Take This, which is a mental health nonprofit that serves the gaming industry and the gaming community. I have been studying games and the gamers who play them for more than 10 years. And I recently started a YouTube channel called Zeitgeist, where I aim to bridge the gap between moral panic and scientific understanding of what games are and what they are not.
Excellent. And Cal.
Everybody, and thanks everybody here for joining me on this panel. Appreciate it. I'm Callahan Walsh. I'm a child advocate with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I'm actually the son of John and Reve Walsh, who co-founded the organization after my brother went missing in 1981. But I think more importantly, I'm a father and a gamer. So yes, still a gamer. And I think that nexus of child safety that we provide at the National Center and being that clearinghouse, when I started at the National Center, I was all involved in outreach and prevention education. That's still where my heart lies. So being a father now and a gamer and having this nexus where we can keep kids safe online is so important to me. And that's why I love having these conversations and so honored to be on this chat.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules for this really, really important conversation. Rachel, let me begin with you. You mentioned panic earlier, and I think we all know and have read many articles and watched many television programs around the panic around video games. Tell us, what are the benefits of children and teens in terms of playing online games?
So many. I'm not sure I have enough time. When we talk about games and the benefits, the first thing that usually comes up is games and learning. Video games have been linked to a variety of improvements in cognitive skills, problem solving, multitasking, creativity, leadership skills. And a lot of this learning is unintentional, which is what's really unique about games. I don't sit down to play a game in order to learn problem solving, but I learn it just through engaging in the space. And of course, the other big thing is that games are social, and social play is important for not just children, but adults too, as maybe many of us have learned and gone back to our love for games. I know Callahan said he's always a gamer, in the last year when we couldn't get together, having that area for social play, it's great for our longevity, it's great for stress release. There's a lot of benefits.
All right. What about friendships? Is there any research around that, friendships and online gameplay?
Absolutely. Games are a great place to solidify friendships that already exist, playing with people that you know up the road or people from the town that maybe you used to live in. It's also a great place for meeting new friends. And, research has found that these online friends are great sources of social and emotional support. So it's not so much a dichotomy either. It's kind of fluid. I have my friends that I know at school online, and I meet friends online than in the real world, which of course we have to do safely. And I'm sure we are going to talk about that as well.
Well, and maybe a follow-up to that. What has the pandemic shown in terms of this? Has it had an impact in terms of friendships online? Has it been positive? Has it been negative?
Games have been, I've said it before, the saving grace, I would say, of COVID-19. Games are a special, unique ecosystem. As I mentioned, it's about social play. It's that interactivity. It's about doing something together. And when you're not able to, play basketball in the streets with your friends anymore, because you have to stay 6 feet apart, being able to engage safely in this space and still have that collaborative or competitive nature of these shared interactions, it's critical for friendship development. Again, not just for children, also for adults throughout the lifespan. So over COVID, we saw an increase in playtime. We saw an increase in people using streaming services like Twitch. So I think it's not just me who's on to the positive benefits of the social interaction of games over the last year, especially.
Right. And I guess this is pandemic related as well, but there's been this vexed question about screen time. Actually, it goes back years, quite frankly. And Cal and Pat, feel free to jump in on this one as well. But Rachel, how should parents approach the issue of screen time?
It's a great question. I get it a lot. A lot of people want a magic number for which there is not one. I like to approach it from a digital diet perspective. If we think about the food pyramid, cookies are at the top. I can't have cookies all day long as much as I would like to. The same you can say about screen time. There's like the cookies of screen time, and then there's kind of the meat and potatoes of screen time is using the computer for school or FaceTiming grandma, that's probably more in the meat and potatoes, watching unboxing videos on YouTube, which my children love. That's more at the top with the cookies. So it's about balance. It's not about one set number of hours.
And based on our research, oh, sorry, Cal, go ahead.
No, Pat, go ahead. No, you got it.
Well, no, I was just going to say we have research. We do research every year with parents of kids who play video games, and almost 80% of parents have rules, household rules about how much time their kids are allowed to spend on screens. It's a typical rule. And so I would encourage parents to establish those rules. Obviously, during the pandemic, we found that parents are more flexible about those rules, and necessarily so. And the other thing that I'd like to add is that there are parental controls that help parents set screen time limits and enforce those screen time limits. So it depends on the console that you have or the device that you have, but parents should familiarize themselves with those controls if they really are concerned about the amount of time that their child is playing online, that you can limit that time even by day of the week or how many hours a day and that sort of thing. So it's important for parents to familiarize themselves with those settings.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We're constantly trying to put these things in place that equip parents with the ability to monitor screen time, to monitor the activity. And it's been difficult for them, especially during COVID, because of the increased screen time that everybody's experiencing, not just the child because they're at home, but the parent themselves. Many parents are at home working in an at-home environment, and so they're on the screen, the child's on the screen. Unfortunately, we know at the National Center, the increased screen time just increases the opportunities for child predators to harm children. But again, it's talking to kids about making these safe and smart decisions, having parents understand, when they're using the consoles, where the consoles are located. But again, it can be difficult because we walk around with these cell phones in our pockets now as well. And those go into the bedroom or into the bathroom. And so, talking about these things and equipping parents with all the resources and abilities that they can to be monitoring the screen time, to be talking to their kids about the diet that we talk about all the time. That's what's so important, and really coming together as a whole industry and people like we have on the panel, policymakers and the such, to really talk about these issues and make sure that the care providers, the parents and people at home that are making sure that children are safe on these devices know that these resources exist and know that these programs are out there to help them.
Well, which is a perfect segue, Cal, to my next question for you, Pat, which is what resources are available to parents, guardians, who are seeking guidance about children
Yeah.
playing games online. You started to
Yeah.
mention time limits. What are the other resources?
Well, so there are a lot of resources. First and foremost, we have rating information, and it's a three-part system. We have age ratings, which suggest age appropriateness. We have content descriptors, which will indicate why we assigned the particular rating that we did, what type of content a parent might be concerned about if they're considering a particular game for their child. And then thirdly, and most important for this conversation, we have something called interactive elements. And that's everything from in-game purchases to users interact, which will indicate when a game enables online gameplay. But on top of that, you can go to esrb.org and get step-by-step instructions on how to set up parental controls. You can search by title, game title, to get all the great information before you go out shopping. We have blogs and a newsletter you can sign up for. We have a blog actually about what parents need to know about multiplayer online games, as well as blogs about Roblox, if your child's playing Roblox, which is obviously an online game, and Fortnite. So it's important for parents to be able to utilize those resources and engage with them, including actually, there's a family discussion guide. I think, first and foremost, you need to be able to have a conversation with your child or children about games. There are lots of resources available to help lead that conversation, but it's important to keep that door open. So lots of resources.
Well, one of them I don't think you've touched on yet are the ESRB ratings themselves. Are parents aware of them, and do they check them before letting their kids play?
Yes, indeed. About 80, according to our research with parents of children who play video games, 84% of parents are aware of the ESRB ratings, and they say that 3/4 of the time they check them. In other words, or actually, sorry, 3/4 of parents check them regularly, and that means all the time or most of the time. So ratings have been a primary resource for parents when they're looking for guidance about whether or not a game is appropriate for their child. Of course, there's also other resources. They can go online, they can watch videos if they have any questions. For physical games, we have rating summaries on our website, which give you even greater details. So if you want to understand what language is in the game, or what type of suggestive content may be in the game, or what type of violence and the context in which that violence may be experienced, we have lots of details and information about that on our website. Again, if you search by title, you'll access not just the basic rating information, but those rating summaries.
Yeah, I think that's so important, as you mentioned, because I think so many parents just see the rating and are like, well, they'll make a snap judgment. But you guys really do dive in to the mechanics of the game, the interactivity of the game, and there's a lot more information that parents can glean from really kind of taking a little bit deeper than just the rating. I mean, obviously, the rating is fantastic; it gives you that snapshot. But if a parent wants to dive deeper, ESRB has all that great stuff there as well.
And parents tell us that each of those three parts of the rating system are equally important. So it's not just about the age ratings anymore. It's also about checking those content descriptors and those interactive elements, because each one is important to a parent in terms of being informed about the games that they're bringing into their home.
Right. Well, let's shift gears again. And Cal, I'm going to come to you. So say a parent, or for that matter, a company, sees something illegal that's going on. How do they go about reporting it to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children? Talk us through that reporting process.
Sure, absolutely. So the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children operates what's called the cyber tip line, and we take in reports of any suspected child sexual abuse that happens online. That could be anything from sextortion to online enticement to grooming and luring. Those reports are created by internet service providers, the gaming industry, as well as individuals, and sent to the National Center. In fact, in 2019, we had about 16.9 million reports that were made to NCMEC around suspected child sexual exploitation. In the early, beginning of the pandemic, well, the first year of the pandemic in 2020, we saw about a 26% increase in those reports to about 21.7 million reports. So what a company can do is when there is something that is flagged on their end, they can actually send that to the National Center through an encrypted reporting mechanism maintained by the National Center. We have over 1,800 companies worldwide that have access to reporting through us. Some smaller companies, they will use our secure reporting through a form and submit them sort of manually. But there are larger companies that are submitting reports in the thousands, tens, even hundreds of thousands at a time, this bulk reporting. So we have an API that NCMEC utilizes to automate those reports. There's just so many that come in. And so if there are any companies that are interested in reporting, you can reach out to the National Center, that the ESP team at ncmic.org, we can get you situated and hooked up with reporting mechanisms to the National Center. But again, for many internet service providers, this is actually federally mandated that they report to the National Center. And as I mentioned before, we're unfortunately seeing those reports increase.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about what happens once you've actually received a report. I mean, what goes on? It feels sometimes like a black box for people reporting, not just to NCMEC,
Sure.
but to Facebook or Twitter. What actually goes on?
Yeah, and unfortunately, that feedback loop isn't always there because of the sensitivity of many of these reports. But what happens
Sure.
is when someone does make that report to Facebook or what have you, that report is then sent to the National Center. And through our hotline, we will actually prioritize those reports based on various information. For example, if we know a child is believed to be in immediate danger, they will be elevated to priority one. Once they're prioritized, that information is sent, those cases are sent over to highly trained professionals at the Exploited Children's Division here at the National Center, where they will add value to those reports and ultimately try to find out where that child's sexual exploitation occurred, because it's really about jurisdiction when it comes to prosecution. So what they have to do is try to determine where and when this image was taken, or video, or what have you, where that content was created, and then determine which agency would best have that information for investigation and review. So not only do we work with state and local law enforcement, but all these reports are available to all federal agencies as well as over 130 countries internationally.
Yeah, and the international aspect is extremely important and no doubt we have international viewers on this too, and each country has its own reporting mechanisms. How You may not want to answer this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Have you found the video game industry to be a good partner in reporting violations to NCMEC?
They have been a good partner, and they're becoming an even better partner, and that's what is so great, because it's unfortunate we have so many of these great technologies that have been designed and developed with the best intentions. However, we have ill-intended people out there that co-opt them and use them for nefarious purposes. And so for the gaming industry to say, hey, we understand that sometimes these things are used to harm children, we want to make sure this doesn't happen on our platforms. We want to work with the National Center and other organizations that are in this space to make sure we come up with the best policies, the best mechanisms, reporting, what have you. They understand this is really holistic approach. We have to hit it in many different angles. Not only do we have to tackle the immediacy of cases that have already happened, but also the prevention aspect as well, which is huge. So, working with ESA and being connected directly with some of their associates has really been beneficial, because we can really kind of get into the nitty gritty a bit more and really come up with some of those policies, because certain games and certain platforms can vary throughout the industry. And so it's not always a silver bullet that works for everybody, and coming up with the right policy that fits the right platform is so important.
Great, thanks. Rachel, I want to come back to you and ask you about what the current research is showing about playing video games. Is it bad news? Is it good? Where are we at with that?
We've been studying the uses and effects of games for decades now, 40 years, maybe 50. And so we know a lot more than we did when the initial moral panic hit about, what's happening in these dimly lit arcades and what do we need to be concerned about. I mean, if I want to go in broad strokes, we know that there are no significant links between violent video games and violent behavior. We know that video game addiction is an incredibly tenuous concept that is being actively debated right now. There's not really much evidence to suggest that games are of themselves addictive, but perhaps people use them in problematic ways as a maladaptive coping strategy for something else underlying, like increased stress or increased anxiety. We know that games are great tools for mental health. As I mentioned earlier, they're good for stress release, they're good for friendship formation, and generally mood management, taking us from bored to less bored, or in a angry to less angry. And we know they're great tools for social connection. So there's a lot of different areas that have gotten quite a bit of research over the last, like I said, half century. So it's more good than bad, or at the very least neutral. That would be the takeaway.
Well, no, all right. I'm going to call you on this because you've now said the P word twice. Panic. What are you referring to? Where's the panic coming from? Is it just video games? Does it go back to television, radio? I actually read a history of the introduction of the bicycle in Germany, which caused a moral panic back in the 1880s
Yeah.
because young women were able to get onto these newfangled devices and go unaccompanied to the next
There
village.
you go.
Can you
Aristotle
imagine?
actually talked about the written word, because then we would no longer remember things because we would have paper in the written word to
Socrates
help.
was concerned about that too. So
Yes,
talk to
yes.
me about the moral panic. Where are we at with that?
Where are we at? So moral panic, it's normal to be panicked about things we don't understand. So moral panic refers to just kind of this general panic that we feel when new technology comes out. So, the bicycle, written word, rock and roll, Elvis, Dungeons and Dragons, video games. The thing that's unique about video games is it's the longest standing moral panic that we've had, certainly in our lifetimes. We've seen it since, the 1970s when arcades were popularized, and we still see it today. So you want a simple answer to a complex problem. Bad things happen. It must be the video games. So that's kind of the element of panic. Even though we know now, as I mentioned, we have all this research kind of disputing these facts, kind of like the links between violent video games and violent crime. That's a very strong kind of moral panic claim that we see that's really had a lot of longevity, despite the fact that scientific research does not support those links.
I
All
think,
right.
parents
Okay.
have almost two types of reactions, right? They either have that moral panic, or oftentimes they don't get into it at all. They almost turned a blind eye, right? And I feel like that is
Mm-hmm.
a reaction you get from, and both of those reactions are reactions you get from a lot of parents who maybe didn't play video games. And the same you see with social media, right? With parents who didn't grow up with social media, either they're panicked about it, or, with their kid being on it, or they turn a blind eye and it's Wild West, which both of those scenarios are not good. We want parents to be clued in to what their children are doing online, to understand the platforms that they're on. And really gaining that knowledge, I think, helps dissuade both. I think it gets parents out of, parenting up and really, talking to their kids about what kind of, what they're doing online and conversations that they're having. But then it also helps alleviate some of those knee-jerk reactions I think some parents have to video games who maybe just don't understand the platform so well.
100%.
There's
That's
so many.
I was going to pivot to you, Pat. I was going to say that's why what
Yeah.
Pat was saying earlier is so important. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that, their bottom line is that even if parents aren't familiar with video games themselves, there's so many things that they can do to either educate themselves or to take control. And it's pretty easy. I mean, the ESRB ratings, obviously, we've gone through those. The parental controls not only allow you to manage screen time, but to limit spending, which we know that parents are very concerned about if their kid using their account to buy things online and buy new games or buy in-game items. And to manage who their child can play with. That's particularly relevant in this conversation. Each of the consoles have parental controls that enable parents to manage online communications. And so it's important, again, to reiterate that parents need to familiarize themselves with those settings. So I think that, and then on top of that, there are specific games like Roblox, like Fortnite, and even Minecraft that have in-game controls for parents that allow you to do a number of the things that you can do at the device level, but actually specific to that game. And then, of course, lastly, a child can always block, mute, or report another player. And so it's so important for parents to be able to encourage their child that they're not going to get into trouble if they report another player. It's okay. If somebody's making you feel uncomfortable and harassing you or bullying you, go report that player. Or mute them or block them so that you don't have to have exposure to those. So there are a lot of different things that parents can do to help their child manage or for them themselves to manage the online gameplay. So,
Yeah, that's a great point, Pat, because we've just did some research that looked at the difference between parental controls, the traditional ones that parents establish and create for their kids, but also the online safety tools that are designed specifically for kids, teens, young adults to manage their online experience. And actually, there's kids, not surprisingly, don't like parental controls very much, but they really like online safety tools. It empowers them, it gives them a sense of control.
That's right.
And we find a pretty high knowledge, recognition of them, and use of them. But Rachel, I want to come back to you. How can we use gaming and the gaming experience to teach kids and adults, because adults play games, for heaven's sakes, I play games, to be good digital citizens in other settings, in real life settings, would you say?
Yeah, I think it's important that we see that our online space is an extension of our offline space. We don't really see this hard and fast line anymore between virtual world and non-virtual world, or online friends and offline friends. Research has found what we do in the virtual world can translate. So, the leadership skills that we learn from leading groups in Fortnite, for instance, does translate into real world abilities to do that, on the schoolyard. So I think it's important that we just note that it's just another place that we engage and interact, and what we learn and what we experience there can translate into other areas of our life. So I think it's just about kind of like reframing. What we do there matters. If there's a bully, you report them. Just like if there's a bully in school, you tell your teacher. It's just an extension of our lives.
Great. Okay. Pat, I want to come back to you because we've started in on this conversation about parental controls, online safety tools, and so on. Do the safety controls differ by console, or are they pretty universal?
Yes, they do. I mean, there are basic, general features that each of them have, but they are implemented differently. The installate or the activation of those controls is different. So that's why esrb.org or parentaltools.org is another URL. Parents can go and look at those step-by-step instructions on how to set those controls up. So there are some nuances, but basically they can do a minimum of 4 things. One is block by age rating. One is manage online communication. Another is manage spending. And then, of course, limit screen time. So those 4 things you can do. It's a little different depending on the console that you use.
But that's very encouraging that a parent can expect, at the very minimum, those 4 things.
Yeah.
Right.
And we find that 83% of parents are enabling parental controls on a game device in the home, and that could be a computer, a mobile device, or a console. So we do know that parents are finding these controls and using them. Obviously, it's higher usage for the under 13-year-olds than the over 13-year-olds, because we do find, based on our research, that parents begin to, ease up a little bit on those controls as their kids get into their teenage years, which is appropriate. But anyway, so we do find pretty good usage, but it can always be better.
Yeah, and from our research, we found the shift is around high school age, where the emphasis goes from parental controls to online safety tools. And oftentimes we find kids are actually telling their parents what kind of safety features they're using and teaching them, which is interesting. Yeah. So we've talked about technology tools, but what about good old-fashioned household rules? What types of rules are you finding that are typical that parents are using when it comes to their kids playing online.
Yeah. Yeah, very important. And virtually all parents we talk to have some sort of household rules. Number one, about spending money. So that's the top one. And then close after that is the sharing of personal information. Parents set very strict rules about what type of information you can share online. So we know that those are the two top concerns and the two top rules that are likely to be in place and likely to be enforced. Third up is the permission to play a particular game, whether it's by genre or the content or the age rating. But most parents have rules about what types of games their child can play. Then comes screen time limitations. As I said, it's been a little tricky during the pandemic because parents have eased up on those limitations, so they might be a little more flexible about those, but they do have rules about screen time, whether it's, you can only play games after your homework's done or your chores are done or after your activities or, or only on the weekends. So there are rules in place about screen time limitations. And then lastly, we find most parents do have rules about online gameplay, which is particular to this conversation, who they can play with. And again, as the child is younger, parents are going to be more restrictive about who they can play with online. As the child goes into their teenage years, they're going to want to be able to make new friends on Fortnite or play with teams that they're going to obviously be playing with people that they may not know. But that's again where these rules come into place, and the in-game controls become so important for parents to know about, that the child can block, mute, or report other players. And the other aspect of gaming is that virtually every game has community guidelines. And it's a great teachable moment for a parent to sit down and read the community guidelines with their child so that they understand what's the type of behavior that they need to model and what they can expect from other players in the game. So those community guidelines are really important. Look, all the consoles are doing their best, as Cal indicated, to make sure that they're monitoring and they're moderating the online communities for their games. And in fact, all three consoles have a joint principles that they've published for online safety, but they are doing an awful lot, whether it's human moderation or trying to find ways to use AI to identify inappropriate behavior in their online communities and enforcing those community guidelines.
Brilliant. Either of you two want to add anything, or for that matter, any tips that you have for parents or stuff that you use in your own home?
I mean, I just want to say that's why it's so important that games are a conversation in the house, which is what Pat has mentioned several times. And I think it's just worth reinforcing because my children are very young. My oldest is 6, okay? So she's very limited. She can't interact with anybody online. She can play Minecraft in her private Minecraft server. Like, it's very restrictive. But by having the conversation of this is why, and it's safety for you because of why, and you don't share your name and where you live because of why. When they get older and those restrictions become looser, they know why and they can monitor themselves. And we've had those conversations, or they feel comfortable coming to you and saying, I didn't like this. This felt weird. And I'm like, haha, have you heard of Cal's organization? You might want to, let's go here and make a report. It's important to have those open lines of dialogue. And the phrase I often say is games shouldn't be a subject of conflict. They should be a subject of conversation, because they are in the home, in most homes, and will continue to be. And having that open line of communication is probably the most valuable tool you have as a parent in this context.
Yeah, if you stigmatize games, Kat, I would just say, I would ditto what Rachel just said. If you stigmatize games in the home, your child's going to be less likely to come to you if they have issues. It's really important to make games a positive experience. In fact, I encourage parents to get in there and play with their child from time to time. We know that many parents do, but that's a great way to bond with their child. Games shouldn't be used as something, it gets taken away as a form of punishment. Because the more that happens, the less likely the child is going to share with their parents, the positives and the negatives.
I couldn't agree with both of those statements. And the communication is huge as well too. We at the National Center, of course, we sit on a mountain of data. And so we try to use the information that we gather through the cyber tip line and all these millions of reports that we analyze to try to come up with the best practices and come up with research-based information to provide to parents and educators to make sure that what they're telling their kids and making sure that they're, empowering their children, that information is the latest and greatest. So there's tons of different resources that we have, other organizations, and tons of different safety rules and little lessons here and there. But there really is like a top three, like 30,000 foot view that I use to tell parents, and I use this with all sorts of online safety as well. And one is try to understand the technology the best you can. Oftentimes that's jumping on that console or that platform with the child and asking them questions. How does this work? Getting on there and gaming yourself. Number two is to set ground rules and stick to them, especially if there's been bad behavior in the past. And last is to have ongoing conversations with your kids about safety, because the conversations you're having with your youngest one when they're first getting on the internet is a vastly different conversation you're having with your teen and tween when they're sort of an internet power user at that point. So it really is important to have those open lines of communication and look for all the resources that are available. National Center has great programs that are free, but so does so many other organizations. I know, FOSI has great stuff. Common Sense Media has great stuff. I mean, look at the ESRB ratings. There's so many great things out there for parents. We really just encourage you to do just that. You don't have to become an expert overnight, but try to inform yourself. And oftentimes the best way to do that is engaging with your child around what they're into and what their interests are. And that's just a great thing for parenting, bottom line.
Yeah, and I would add, as you are creating the household rules, involve your kids in that. Maybe not when they're 6 and 5 and 4, but I mean, for instance, when our daughter was 10 and 11, she was obsessed with Sims. She was just forever on that. She's now a commercial real estate broker, but there you go. She took her passion for a video game and turned it into a real life job, which I think is amazing. So, but we had to sit her down, and she sat at one end of the table. We were at the other 10, and we invited her to write down, to think, what is a reasonable amount of time to be on a daily basis? Differences between weekdays and weekends. What are the repercussions if you stay on too long? So in other words, she got to show us what she thought was reasonable. We then showed her what we thought was reasonable. Often what happens was she was more severe on herself than we were. So we would find a sort of middle ground. But if you engage your kids in the rule making, they're far more likely to own them and to adhere to them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Stephen. Yeah.
Sorry, Pat, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I couldn't agree more with you, Stephen. And I would just add one more thing to the list of tips. I think it's really important for parents to understand that if their child is lying about their age when they register for games or register on a device, they're overriding all of the protections for under 13-year-olds. And I think it's really important for parents to make sure that when they're establishing those household rules and having those conversations, that their child is registered for the age that they are. Because you'd be so surprised how many protections there are for under 13-year-olds, as long as the game operator or the console knows the age, and it's a correct age.
Brilliant. Quick reminder, we're going to be coming to questions shortly. Please let us know, what is it, you've got these fantastic experts here. What is it that you would love to hear them talk about? Please include that in the question box down there. Cal, I'm going to come back to you. NCMEC works with the game companies themselves, but how do you guys work to promote and enhance online safety amongst young people?
Yeah, so that's so important for us, right? Is not just having the resources and creating all this great content, but making sure it gets out to the masses, because it does no good sitting on a website that nobody visits or in a resource closet somewhere that never gets distributed. So it's really about engaging not only with individuals who are playing, but other organizations who see a lot of children as well too. We have formal partnerships with organizations like the Boys and Girls Clubs, right? And so making sure that these areas, and again, we focus a lot on educators as well. It's not always just about parents. Making sure that educators can bring digital citizenship and online safety into the classroom is so important, because they are seeing so many kids and they're in that perfect space to be teaching these types of things. So really, getting it out there to the public, letting the public know these resources are there, they're free. This isn't going to cost a parent a penny, maybe a little bit of their time. But other than that, it's making their child, empowering their child to be able to identify risky situations and learn how to avoid them. Because really, ultimately, it's the child that needs to be empowered, not necessarily the parent. The parent can know every internet safety tactic and tip out there, but it's the child that has to make that safe and smart decision. The parent isn't always going to be there to save that child from making that bad decision. So that's why it's so important to have these conversations. Look for the resources to help you. We have conversation starters. We have conversation guides. Look for teachable moments. Stephen, as you were talking about sitting down with your daughter, have these conversations regularly, because that makes them more comfortable. If you just all of a sudden, plop your kid down on the couch and have this, safety talk about gaming, and all of a sudden it's coming out of left field, they might be looking out of the side of their eye. But if you look for these teachable moments, if you're talking to kids about safety regularly, having it a natural part of your everyday conversation really makes it so much easier to talk about these things, and opens up your children to be, having that two-way street where they're telling you about, what's going on, and really opening up that trust circle is so important, especially for the older kids. And so, getting the information out there to the parents, any way we can, whether it's formal partnerships with other organizations, through social media, through webinars like this, that's what it's about. Letting the masses know that these resources are here for them, they exist, and we're ready to help you incorporate them into your everyday conversation.
Well, talk a little bit more. I know you have a tip sheet called Gaming Safely, and also NCMEC has a NetSmarts program. What could parents expect to find in those?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, as the clearinghouse for missing and exploited children's issues, we really rely on our data and information to inform our program. So NetSmarts is a program, an internet safety program that we created actually in 2001, which is sort of the ancient days of the internet. And of course, we've had to continually update those resources, because that landscape and those waters are constantly shifting and changing. So we use the information from our cyber tip line to inform these prevention education resources. And those resources can be everything from a tip sheet about different specifics, whether it's sextortion, grooming, luring, or gaming. We have specific gaming tip sheets as well, we have actually created video games themselves that teach kids how to make safe and smart decisions. But we have animated series and activity sheets. In fact, we have an animated series called Into the Cloud, which follows a brother and sister, Nettie and Webster, who, through different situations and scenarios, learn how to be safe. And it's called Into the Cloud. Season 2 is out now. It's an animated series that looks like a Saturday morning cartoon. I kind of call it sticking vitamins in the junk food, if you will. It's something that's entertaining and it's engaging for kids, but they're learning at the same time. So I recommend any parent go check out NetSmarts. You can find it at missingkids.org or directly at netsmarts.org. It's a fantastic program, tons of resources, all age appropriate. And for any community leaders or educators, there's also fully fledged presentations in there. They're designed beautifully. There's animated videos throughout it, so it's not death by PowerPoint. They come with speaker's notes. There are just so many resources through the NetSmarts program, whether you're a parent, educator, community leader, or the child themselves. There's so much there, but there's other great programs out there as well, too. I can't stress that enough. Of course, NetSmarts is ours at the National Center. I promote that. But I encourage any parent just to take a look. NetSmarts might have something specific that you like. Maybe you find something else somewhere else. But look for those resources. They're there and they're available.
All right. Rachel, let me play a little bit of devil's advocate here, because in our recent research, one thing that kept coming up was the overwhelm that parents felt. Not just the devices, not just the apps, not just the games, but also all of these materials that Cal was so clearly describing. How do we deal better as an industry, as a community of folks concerned about this issue, to help parents overcome this sense of overwhelm?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Cal who mentioned either you dive in or you just don't even want to go into that water at all. I think we can start small. We can start with literally looking over your child's shoulder and being like, "What are you doing? Who are you playing with? How do you like it?" And it can progress from there. I mean, I don't think any of us expect everyone to all of a sudden read all the materials on NetSmarts and read all the materials on the ESRB and go to take this and read everything that's ever been written. But you can show a little bit of interest and a little bit of engagement and slowly work up to sitting down and making rules together, or checking out one of those PowerPoint presentations and educating yourself on the different ESRB parental tools, one step at a time. And of course, Pat mentioned playing with your kids. That is a good crash course. Nothing makes my 6-year-old happier than seeing me fail completely in Minecraft. It's great for everyone. Maybe not me, but I did learn a lot, even through failure. So don't be afraid to give it a try.
Brilliant.
I think one of the other benefits, Stephen, of playing with your child is you sort of begin to understand the rhythm of games, of the specific games that your child's playing, because oftentimes games become a struggle. You want your child to come to dinner, or you want your child to stop playing, but you don't understand they may be in the middle of a mission with a bunch of teammates. They may be in the middle of a competition and they can't leave at that moment. So there's too much social pressure, or they're in the middle of a competition about to win something, or get to the end of a mission. So I think it's really important for parents to understand the flow and the rhythm of games as well, so that it doesn't become this really this battle to get your child off of the screen and go do something else, that you might want to wait until they finish the match or the mission. So
right. Okay, well, I can't let this hour go by without mentioning the latest buzzword, which is metaverse. Whatever you want to think about that word, for many folks, particularly in the gaming community, it's like, duh, we're already here. So let's talk a little bit about virtual reality, augmented reality. Maybe someone would like to define what VR and AR actually is and what it's not. And then talk about the implications for safety in these new environments. Actually, Rachel, I'll come back to you first on this.
Oh, good. I can do the definitions because I feel like Cal or Pat would be much better to speak about safety concerns. Virtual reality is no longer like it was when I was a kid. Oculus is a very popular provider of virtual reality. You put on goggles, the entire environment changes, and you can engage in the environment. Augmented reality is kind of augmenting our actual reality. So like Fitbit watches, I feel like are a good example of augmented reality. They're becoming ever more popular. They're becoming ever more affordable. They are great learning tools. I always like to say, if you want to learn about something historical, you can read a book, or you can pop on some virtual reality glasses and actually explore ancient Rome and walk around it. I mean, it's a pretty incredible opportunity that these technologies provide for learning and for games and for fun. In terms of safety, I will pass it on to my esteemed colleagues.
Well, I would just add that. Go ahead, Stephen. Go ahead.
So all I was going to say with augmented reality, having owned a pair, well, actually they gave it to me, a pair of Google glasses from back in the day. It's layering on digital information, experiences, whatever you want to call it, onto the real world, as opposed to virtual reality, where you pretty much leave the real world and fully enter an immersive reality. Pat and Cal.
Yeah. Now, I would just say, Pokemon Go is a great experience of augmented reality. Very, very popular game when it came out. Still popular. But it's a great example of augmented reality, which is a game that incorporates the real world into the gameplay. But look, virtual reality, those headsets are not recommended for young children from a physical standpoint. So, I would not encourage parents to get virtual reality headsets for, your under 13-year-olds. But yes, they are immersive. Oh, by the way, All of the Oculus games and apps are rated by the ESRB, so please check those out if you have a headset and are looking to download some new games or apps. But the safety features the safety issues are different. I mean, if you've got a headset on, you better be careful that there's not furniture around you, and you're going to trip over and end up on the floor. But and an augmented reality, sort of the same thing. If you're distracted in the real world playing, trying to find Pokemon, and you're not paying attention, when you're crossing the street, that's an issue. So there are real physical safety issues with respect to those applications. But the online safety issues are the same. You want to be, again, it goes back to sort of what your household rules and instructing your kids on what they can do and should be doing online and what they shouldn't be doing, and making sure that if there's something that makes them uncomfortable, that they come to you to talk about it or they report it. And so I think there's going to be more and more focus on these sort of immersive worlds. So it's something that parents just need to be more and more aware of. They're going to, there's going to be more of them.
Funny enough, Pat's right about the physical safety stuff. I mean, how many videos have you seen lately of somebody, smashing their flat screen or diving, on a coffee table or something like that? And we got to be aware that, look, we are not in that virtual reality space. We are still stuck, on this planet, and there are hard surfaces around us sometimes. But from the National Center's perspective, we'll see, because while VR isn't brand new, it's still an emerging technology. There aren't as many games developed for VR. There aren't as many players on, users using VR as traditional consoles. But as Pat mentioned as well, those child safety tips and discussions and best practices will be very similar to the best practices that we're using now. Empowering your child to understand that there are dangers out there, that these platforms can be used for incredibly good things and great things, great relationships, but there are bad people out there as well too. And just empowering them with that same safe and smart decision making, understanding that they are a digital citizen, they have responsibilities themselves to act appropriately. And I think a lot of the stuff that we talk about now with traditional video games does translate. What you do have to start to get into and think about is the self-production of child sexual explicit content when in a VR setting. And we are seeing more self-production of child sexual abuse content, sexual explicit content than ever before, primarily because, the digital devices, we have more access to them. Again, the cell phones with cameras and videos and this and that, and it will become that way because VR does require video cameras and other applications to be able to work, right? And so you have increased connectivity with other people from around the world. And so again, those safety messages will remain the same. We might see the exploitation change a bit, and of course, as reports come into the cyber tip line, we'll start analyzing those in real time and coming up with best practices to suit those emerging trends, because unfortunately those who prey on children are very tech savvy. They are steps ahead of legislature. They are using these platforms for nefarious purposes and finding the ways to skirt around the precautions and the regulations that we put in front. So keeping an eye on the space, not treating it as a wild west, and making sure that we are continuing to address VR and safety concerns, and looking at reports coming with that best practices, and continuing to have webinars like this. And so when VR really does become that platform of choice, when it does supersede the traditional consoles, we'll have those safety discussions and those best practices in place. So I have a feeling this won't be the last of these types of webinars.
All right, well, thank you. Let me just quickly check in with our hosts, the ESA. Do we have any questions, any burning questions that have come through?
Yeah, so just right off the top, everyone's saying such a great panel, so congrats to everyone on this panel, and again, thank you. Pat, we had a few questions come in about the recent ESRB Spanish language rollout, if you could talk us through that and what happened with that.
Yeah, so we've had a number of Spanish instructions and assets on esrb.org over the years, but we never really had a hub for Spanish-speaking families to go to for more information. So we've gathered all of that together into a new website called Vamos a Jugar, which means let's play. And it has everything from a ratings guide in Spanish to some blogs in Spanish, some videos in Spanish, a number of different assets that we think are very helpful for the Spanish-speaking community to help them with their, when they're going out shopping or when they have game consoles in their home and want to know how to best manage them. The other thing is that those parental control instructions that I spoke about, that's available at esrb.org or parentaltools.org. We also have links to Spanish versions of those instructions through Vamos a Jugar.
Great. And then another question that we got, I'll throw this over to you, Rachel, and anyone else feel free to jump in. We were talking about screen time a little bit earlier. Is there a difference between, playing a video game for an hour versus scrolling on Instagram for an hour when it comes to development with a child? And should we start differentiating that and kind of keep that in parents' mind when it comes to screen time?
I mean, what you're doing on the screen does matter. I mean, for a 14, 15, 16-year-old, perhaps Instagram is more of a social connection tool than games are for them. But generally speaking, games are interactive. So in that sense, you are learning, I say in air quotes, different skills by playing video games, whether it be time management or leadership skills or how to read a map or that sort of thing. So they are qualitatively different, but how important and how much value that has for the person using it, I guess, is going to have a lot of individual differences.
Great. Anyone else have any input on that one? Okay. And then real quick, I just wanted to bring up real quick, Rachel, Take This has an ambassador program that I found really interesting, where they kind of have a few streamers, popular people, to kind of focus on mental health with children, that's usually watching these streamers. So could you talk a little bit about that ambassador program?
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing it up. At TakeThis.org, we have a lot of people who stream on Twitch, which twitch.tv is a live streaming platform largely centered around gaming content. So it'll be people streaming themselves playing games. Our ambassadors apply to be Take This ambassadors. They go through mental health training. So they are spaces, they're online spaces hosted by people who are sensitive to the nature of mental health. They are open, safe spaces where people can come and chat and have a community. So if you're looking for a particular Twitch community that you think might be particularly lovely and kind, they're all very kind and kind of, it's most welcoming people on the internet as far as I'm concerned. We have a list of our ambassadors at TakeThis.org. So it's kind of a self-selected group of just lovely people.
Great. All right, Stephen, those were our top burning questions that we have time for. If you want to go ahead and wrap up the webinar. Thank you guys again.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, Amanda. Appreciate it. I guess from where I'm sitting, we're running way out of time now. Thank you to our wonderful, wonderful panelists, Pat, Cal, and Rachel. I've learned a lot. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you all for your participation, your great questions. I know that details and many of the resources that were discussed earlier will be posted on the ESA's website for you if you want further information. And once again, thank you for being a part of this, and safe gaming to you all.